Why is it that a woman who spent her 20s and 30s holding the keys to the kingdom, deciding who was in and who was out, suddenly finds herself at 45 looking at her reflection and realizing she might have locked the wrong people out? There is a deep, often unspoken psychological shift that happens when a woman moves from her age of power to her age of perspective. In her youth, she had the luxury of choice, and she often used that choice to chase the flash, the vibe, and the unpredictability of the high-status man. But as the clock ticks past 40, the psychological math changes. The men she once called boring, the ones she friend-zoned, and the ones she deemed too safe are suddenly the only ones who look like a life raft in a very lonely ocean. Today, we are going to break down the cold, hard psychology of why the ignored man becomes the wanted man only after the party is over, and what this tells us about human value, time, and the price of waiting too long to value character. I'm not here to impress the crowd. I'm here for that person that is quietly rebuilding their lives brick by brick. I'm here to break down the psychology most people ignore. If you're someone who wants to understand patterns instead of repeating them, you belong here. Subscribe if you value clarity over ego. Drop a comment and bring your perspective. Strong conversations build stronger minds. No blame, no bitterness, just awareness, discipline, and growth. To understand this, we have to look at the paradox of choice. When a woman is young and at the peak of her social attraction, she feels like she has an infinite supply of high-value men. Because the supply feels infinite, she doesn't value reliability. Why would you choose a man who is steady when you can have a man who is stunning? Psychologically, she is playing a short-term game. She's looking for a partner who enhances her social status right now. In this stage, the ignored man, the one who is busy studying, working 2 jobs, or just being a decent, quiet human being, is seen as an accessory that doesn't shine bright enough. He's the sensible shoes of the dating world, and at 25, everyone wants to wear high heels, no matter how much they hurt. But life is a long-distance race, not a sprint. As the years roll by, the high-octane men that these women once chased begin to move on to the next generation of young women, or they reveal themselves to be emotionally bankrupt. This is when the contrast principle hits with full force. A woman who has spent 15 years dealing with ghosting, gaslighting, and instability suddenly has a psychological awakening. Her brain, which once craved excitement, now desperately craves regulation. The man who was boring at 25 is now peaceful. His predictability is no longer a flaw, it is his greatest asset. Let's look at the story of a woman we'll call Beatrice. Beatrice was the it girl in her social circle. She was beautiful, smart, and highly sought after. She had a man in her life named Samuel who had been her safety school for a decade. Samuel was a hard-working, honest man who loved Beatrice deeply. He wasn't the tallest, and he didn't have the loudest laugh, but he was the only man who ever truly listened to her. Samuel kept Beatrice in the friend zone for years, using her for emotional support while she gave her time and her heart to men who treated her like an option. She thought Samuel would always be there. By 43, after a series of failed engagements with exciting men, Beatrice decided she was finally ready to settle down with a good man like Samuel. She reached out, expecting him to be waiting where she left him, but Samuel wasn't there. Samuel had spent those years building his life and his self-respect. He had eventually realized his own value and married a woman who didn't need to tire herself out before she chose him. Beatrice was left with the realization that she hadn't just ignored a man, she had ignored a future. This is the negative outcome of the time-value gap, the belief that a good man's patience is infinite. It isn't. This leads us to the accountability phase. For many women over 40, there is a realization that their selector was broken. They realize they were attracted to the very traits that ensured their unhappiness. When they start chasing the men they once ignored, it is often a sign of internal correction. They are finally trying to prioritize character over charisma. However, the difficulty is that the ignored man at 40 is a very different person than he was at 20. He has developed what we call selective guardedness. He knows he is now a prize, and he is often suspicious of women who only see his value now that his utility, his money, his stability, his house, is visible. We see this pattern in what we call hypergamous realignment. In her youth, a woman's hypergamy, her desire to find a partner of higher status, is often focused on physical dominance or social popularity. As she matures, that drive realigns toward resource stability and emotional maturity. The man who was invisible because he didn't have clout is now visible because he has clarity. He is the one who can navigate a crisis. He is the one who doesn't fold under pressure. He is the one who provides a sanctuary. Have you ever seen a man glow up in his 40s and suddenly become the target of all the women who ignored him in high school? Or are you a woman who has experienced this shift in your own heart, where the bad boy now just looks like a bad choice? Tell us your story in the comments. We need to hear how this timing has played out for you. Another psychological factor is the loss of the ego. When a woman is young, her ego is often fed by the difficulty of the men she dates. If she can fix a broken man or keep the attention of a player, she feels powerful. But by 40, she is tired of the project. She doesn't want to be a rehab center for a man's broken personality. She wants a partner. The men she ignored were the ones who didn't need fixing. They were whole to begin with. The realization that she traded wholeness for a project is one of the most painful parts of the 40-plus dating experience. We must also look at the psychology of the provider. Men who are ignored in their youth often develop a very strong internal engine. Because they weren't the chosen ones based on their looks or their social status, they had to build their value through competence. By 40, this competence makes them incredibly attractive. They have a quiet authority. They don't have to shout to be heard. To a woman who has lived through the noise of modern dating, this quiet is magnetic. Let's look at a story of growth, a man we'll call Gabriel. Gabriel was a late bloomer. In his 20s, he was skinny, awkward, and focused on his engineering degree. He was the guy who would help women with their homework but never get asked to the party. He felt the sting of being ignored, but instead of becoming a victim, Gabriel became a builder. He built his body in the gym, he built a successful firm, and most importantly, he built a philosophy of life. He learned that he didn't need to be everything to everyone, he just needed to be everything to himself. At 42, Gabriel was a different animal. He had a presence that commanded respect. He started getting calls from women he hadn't heard from in 15 years, women who were now single and looking for a real man. Gabriel didn't get angry, he simply had a new standard. He met a woman named Elena, who was also in her late 30s. Elena hadn't ignored him in the past, but she had been through her own growth. They met as two finished products. Gabriel's success was that he finally got the girls. His success was that he finally had the self-worth to choose a woman who loved him for his soul and his discipline, not just his stability. This is the biological reality of human life. Men and women are on different value timelines. Women often start with high social value that they must learn to preserve and invest wisely. Men often start with low social value that they must build through sweat and sacrifice. The conflict at 40 happens when a woman who has spent her social value looks for a man who has just earned his. If she approaches him with entitlement, she will fail. If she approaches him with appreciation, she might just find the peace she's been looking for. This transition is why we see so much talk about high-value men. A high-value man isn't just a guy with a big bank account. He is a man who has internal consistency. He is a man who was the same person when he was being ignored as he is now that he is being chased. That integrity is what women over 40 are actually hunting for. They want a man who cannot be bought and cannot be shaken because they finally realized that a man who can be bought by a younger woman or shaken by a new temptation is no man at all. For the women watching, if you are in this position, the first step isn't hunting for the men you ignored. The first step is accountability. Look at your past choices. Ask yourself, what was I looking for then, and what am I looking for now? If you can't explain the difference, you will just repeat the same mistakes with a different face. You have to learn to love the peace before you can love the man who brings it. For the men, if you are the ignored man who is now being noticed, be careful. Do not let your ego take revenge for your youth. It is tempting to want to play the game now that you have the cards, but that will only lead you back to the same emptiness those women are trying to escape. Stay true to the building mindset. Choose a partner who values your bricks, not just your finished castle. Human connection is about timing, but it is also about vision. At 20, we are often blind. At 40, we start to see. The goal is to make sure that by the time you see, you haven't already burned all the bridges that lead to a good heart. When the power dynamic flips, a new set of psychological traps emerges. It is one thing to realize you want the man you once ignored. It is another thing entirely to build a life with a man who remembers exactly how it felt to be your last choice. We are moving into the psychology of re-entry, the stage where the pursuit ends and the reality of two different life paths must finally merge. This is where most relationships either become a masterpiece of maturity or a disaster of resentment. If the foundation of this new connection is just exhaustion on one side and ego on the other, it will crumble. But if it is built on a shared understanding of human error and growth, it can be the most powerful bond you've ever known. I don't make content for the average mindset. I make it for the ones who hold themselves accountable. If you're someone who values clarity over conflict, this channel is for you. Subscribe if you want more psychology-driven breakdowns like this. Add your thoughts in the comments. Thoughtful conversations are always welcome here. Understanding first, judgment later. To understand why this second stage of life is so complex, we have to look at the resentment gap. When a woman over 40 starts chasing the men she once overlooked, she is often coming from a place of post-traumatic growth. She has learned the hard way that charisma is cheap. However, the man she is now chasing has often developed what we call protective cynicism. He remembers being the nice guy who was treated like an option. He remembers the nights he spent working on himself while the women he liked were out with men who didn't respect them. For this relationship to work, the accountability must be mutual. The woman must be honest about why her preferences changed. If she tries to pretend she always liked guys like him, he will see through it instantly. His BS detector has been sharpened by years of being on the outside looking in. The most attractive thing a woman can offer a man she once ignored is radical honesty. Saying, "I wasn't mature enough to value you then, but I have done the work to value you now," is the only way to bridge that gap. Without that honesty, the man will always feel like he is just a retirement plan or a safe harbor after the storm. Let's look at a story of a mistake in this phase, a lesson in utility versus value. We'll call her Diane. Diane was 46, twice divorced, and tired of the dating games. She decided to look up a man named Robert, whom she had known in her 20s. Robert was a solid man, successful, kind, and always stable. In their youth, Diane found him uninspiring. Now she showered him with attention, but Robert noticed something. Diane didn't ask about his passions, his dreams, or his mind. She only asked about his health, his retirement plans, and his house. She was looking for security, not Robert. Robert, having built a high level of self-respect, realized he was being auditioned for a job, not a relationship. He ended the connection, leaving Diane more frustrated than before. The lesson for Diane and for many in this position is that stability is a byproduct of a good man, but it shouldn't be the only reason you want him. If you chase a man for his utility because you're tired of the world, he will eventually feel used. Even the ignored man wants to be desired for his soul, not just his spreadsheet. On the other hand, we have the men's trap. Many men who were ignored in their youth fall into the vengeance trap once they become high value. They get a surge of delayed ego. They want to date the women who ignored them just to even the score, or to finally be the one who does the rejecting. This is a psychological dead end. If you're a man who has finally arrived, your power isn't in getting back at the women from your past. Your power is in your ability to choose a partner who truly sees you. If you spend your 40s trying to win the games you lost in your 20s, you are still letting your past rejection control your future happiness. This leads us to a psychological pattern called the contrast of appreciation. A man who has spent years being invisible often has a massive amount of stored loyalty. When he finally finds a woman who values him, not just for what he has, but for the struggle it took to become who he is, he becomes the most devoted partner imaginable. This is why these later life relationships can be so successful. Both parties have market data. They know what else is out there, and they know it isn't better. They aren't wondering if the grass is greener. They've already been to the other side and realized it's artificial turf. Think about the psychology of the second act. By 40, most of the masking is gone. When you are 20, you are a representative of yourself. You are pretending to be cooler, richer, or tougher than you are. By 40, you are usually just you. This authenticity is what makes the ignored man so attractive. He was always him. He didn't have a mask to take off. The woman, having finally taken off her mask of needing excitement, can finally meet him on a level of soul-to-soul connection. Let's look at a positive outcome, the story of realignment. We'll call him Simon and her Claire. Claire had ignored Simon for 15 years. When they reconnected at 42, Claire didn't come to him with entitlement. She came to him with curiosity. She asked him, "How did you become so steady? What did you learn while I was away?" She validated his journey. Simon, in turn, didn't hold her past choices against her. He recognized that her life lessons had made her a more compassionate, grounded woman. They didn't focus on the lost years. They focused on the found wisdom. Their relationship worked because it wasn't a fallback plan. It was a new beginning. Have you ever found yourself in a relationship where you felt like you were making up for lost time? Or are you currently struggling to forgive someone for not seeing your value sooner? This is a great place to share those thoughts in the comments. How do we move past the "why not sooner" question? Another key behavior to understand is boundary testing. When a woman starts chasing the man she once ignored, that man will often test her. He wants to see if she can handle his no. He wants to know if she respects his time and his peace. If she reacts with anger or diva behavior, he knows she hasn't truly changed. She's just looking for a new target. A man who has built himself from nothing values his peace above all else. To win him, a woman must prove that she is an addition to that peace, not a distraction from it. We also have to discuss the role of emotional intelligence. In our 40s, our empathy circuits are usually more developed. We start to understand that the bad boy we loved at 20 was likely a hurt child in a man's body. We start to see that the boring man was actually a man of high integrity who was protecting his energy. This reframing is a sign of high-level psychological maturity. It's the ability to look at the same person and see a completely different value. This is the red pill truth that many don't want to hear. Your value is not a fixed point. It is a moving target. For women, the social value of youth is a powerful tool, but it is a depreciating asset if not invested in character. For men, utility and stability are appreciating assets. The chasing that happens at 40 is just the market trying to find balance. It's not evil and it's not unfair. It's just how human beings respond to scarcity and quality. For the good men who feel like they are finally being seen, your job is to stay discerning. Don't let your inner child who was lonely at 22 make the decisions for the king you are at 42. You have worked too hard for your peace to give it away to someone who only values you because their other options ran out. Look for the woman who has learned the lesson, not just the woman who was tired of the game. For the women who are waking up, be patient with the men you once ignored. They have spent a long time being second best in the eyes of the world. It takes time for them to trust that your attraction is real. Prove it with consistency. Show him that you value his boring Tuesday nights just as much as his successful Friday nights. Show him that you see the man behind the assets.
The beauty of the second act of life is that it allows for redemption. We all make mistakes in our youth. We all chase things that aren't good for us. The ignored man becoming the wanted man is a story of justice. It's a story that says character eventually wins. It reminds us that while flash gets the attention, substance keeps the light on. As we wrap up this analysis, realize that whether you are the man who was ignored or the woman who is now doing the chasing, the goal is the same: self-respect. A relationship between two people who respect themselves and each other's growth is the only kind that survives the 40-plus era. Stop looking at what was lost in your 20s and start looking at what can be built now with the wisdom you've earned. The fact that you're still here tells me something about you. You don't shy away from uncomfortable truths. You sit with them, you think through them, and most importantly, you use what you learn to grow. That's rare. By watching this, you're not just consuming content, you're actively building yourself, shaping your mindset, and sharpening your awareness. And in this space, you're not alone. There's a community of people committed to understanding behavior, setting boundaries, and improving themselves. If this video gave you insight, clarity, or even a small shift in perspective, subscribe and stay part of this journey. Drop a comment below and share what resonated with you or any experience you've had that connects with this. I read every comment and your voice matters here. Keep challenging yourself. Keep applying what you learn. Keep doing the work. I'll see you in the next one.